YouTube, welcome back to another video where I'm going to break down the main reason why you're not gaining muscle, and it might not be the reason why you think, okay? Now, a lot of people I speak to, especially in these winter months, albeit I am currently in the sunshine in Cyprus, but it is November, and I know back in the UK, back throughout Europe, it's cold, it's dark, we're not as worried about being low body fat percentage because there's no holidays, there's no, going outside, taking your t-shirt off, okay? We want to build muscle, okay? Use this winter period to build some muscle mass and gain some strength in the gym, okay? They can work hand in hand quite nicely. Now, for a lot of people, you're training quote unquote hard, what most people would deem as hard training. You're making sure you're eating well. You might be having protein with each meal. You might be making sure to have big meals throughout the day. Not necessarily maybe count your calories, but you're well fueled, and you're recovering well. Your sleep's pretty good. You're not noticing a real negative impact with sleep. So you're probably thinking, well, why am I not growing muscle mass, or am I growing muscle mass? I'm not too sure. Most people might blame genetics. They might say they don't consume enough protein. They might say that they train hard, but they've got a few injuries and it doesn't allow them to do this and that. They play football, so they don't want to train legs. I've heard that one a few times. But normally the bottleneck is something else, okay? Over the years of both myself building muscle, I'm in a position now where I'm happy with the muscle mass that I've built. I have been bigger. I've definitely carried more muscle, but I'm also all about sort of functionality, being able to run, being able to climb mountains, being able to walk, whatever it may be, without being out of breath. And the heavier I've been in the past, a little bit more of a challenge that has been, okay? Now, the reason why you're not gaining muscle is not because you're not training enough, okay? It's not because you're not eating clean food, quote unquote, chicken, rice, pasta, broccoli, sweet potatoes, fish, etc. It's not because you're not taking the right supplements, okay? Because ultimately, for me, if you're trying to gain muscle mass, I'll be looking at creatine to help with your ATP, so help with your sessions of such and everything else in between. Protein to obviously allow you to hit your protein intake each day. Electrolytes for hydration. They're going to be the main supplementation I would recommend, and I personally recommend for the majority of people I work with, okay? And then it's not because your workouts aren't long enough, okay? These are common myths that may be the reason why you think, I'm not building muscle, okay? We're going to sort of go through and dissect the real reason why you're not building muscle. And that is because you are not training with enough intensity or implementing some form of progressive overload, okay? I see so many people go to the gym. The biggest thing is they think training hard is doing more sets, doing more exercises. Let's do this lap pull down. Let's do this cable row. Now let's just do this pull down machine, even though it is very similar to the first exercise I did. Or let's do a chest fly, then a chest press, then a decline chest press, then an incline chest press, and then a dip, and then another fly. It's not the case, okay? Yes, you've got the right intentions, but the intensity is not there. And I'm going to speak about that why. Same with progressive overload, okay? How are you implementing progressive overload at the moment? Okay, is it a case of you're just guessing your workouts, you're guessing the weights, you're guessing the reps? There's a whole host of things that you probably aren't doing. Okay, most people also don't get close to muscular failure. They might do a couple of reps or do 10 reps because that's what they normally do and stop right there, even though they could have probably done 12, 13 or 14. But in a lot of people's heads, you have to finish on an even number unless it's 15. So either 6 reps, 8 reps, 10 reps, 12 reps, 15 reps. You have to fall on that number. Okay, that's just a guideline. If you get to 12 repetitions and you can still do another 2, take it there. Okay, yes, you might finish on 14 or 13, but that is perfectly fine. Okay, because you don't want to be stopping when the reps become a little bit uncomfortable, because we want to try and be creating a stimulus to each muscle that we're training to adapt for it to grow and come back stronger. Okay, so when I talk about intensity, what does this really mean? Now, training hard is going to be about going within 0 to 3 reps of failure. Okay, now when I say failure, I mean when form is at a position where it's completely broken down, i.e., let's say you're doing a dumbbell shoulder press and you're having to go all the way like this to get the that to me is not failure. To me, failure would be you're trying to press. That's failure. Okay, so we want to be within sort of as close proximity to that as possible, with 0 to 3 reps. Okay, we're not going to stop when it gets uncomfortable. We're not going to stop when feeling quite pumped up. All these fluffy workouts where it's 3 sets of 15 to 20 reps. You might feel good, lots of blood flow, but do a wall sit. You'll get loads of good blood flow and a great pump in your quads. Doesn't mean you're growing your legs. Okay, throw back to the lockdown days. It's not when you get bored either. Some training sessions, they might be a little bit monotonous, but again, get good at just doing the same thing over and over again. Compounds over time. It's going to lay your foundations. True hard sets is where we're going to see the most amount of muscular growth, and we're going to go through that now. Now, what does progressive overload really actually mean? Okay, so if we wanted to sort of define what it meant, make a measurable progress each week. Okay, so each session we do over a long period of time, are we able to make a little bit of progress? Okay, now don't get me wrong. The biggest thing you hear with progressive overload is add more weight or add more reps. All right. Now, if let's say it's add more weight and we need to implement that every single week, you're inevitably not going to be able to lift more weight each week. Because if you started with 30 kilo dumbbells over a year, you're not going to start be lifting 100 kilo dumbbells. It just does not work like that. So there are other ways of looking at how can we implement progressive overload. Yes, more weight. It could be a 2.5 kilo. It could be a 1.25 kilo. Perfect. Over time, that builds up. It could be more repetitions. You might have done 8 reps last week on a dumbbell shoulder press. This week, you managed to get 9 or 10. Perfect. You have added a one or 2 more reps. Perfect. Over a long period of time, that compounds. Then you add the weight because you've hit the top of the rep range, so on and so forth. You could increase your overall volume by doing more sets. And I put this strategically because for me, 2 to 3 working sets per muscle group when training close to proximity to failure is more than enough. Okay, you don't need to be doing 4 or 5 sets, but let's say, for example, you really want to improve a certain body part, you may look to increase the working sets you are doing to help, obviously, with more volume for that targeted area. So if you want to, you're doing 2 sets on a pec deck, for example, and your chest is something you want to develop, you may look to increase or add progressive overload by adding in a 3rd working set. All right. And again, better form, better execution. That is another form of progression. Same with more time under tension. Okay, if you're able to lift the same amount of weight, but this time you're spending 1 second extra per rep compared to the previous week, well, if you do 10 reps, that's 10 more seconds of time under tension as an example, which is only going to be beneficial. Okay, so when I talk about the intensity gap, now most people think they're training 9 out of 10. They think they're training super hard, when in reality, they're probably just very fatigued because they're doing a lot of junk volume and they're not really progressing as efficiently as they could be. All right. Reality, they're probably training at 6, probably maybe 7 out of 10. Depends. Maybe even a 5. I see it all the time. People in the gym do their set, go on their phone, typing away, do their set, blah, blah, blah. They're not thinking about what they're doing. They're not in the set. They're not thinking about, right, what was the weight I used last week, etc. Okay. You're not going to be building muscle mass doing that. All right. They leave 7 reps in reserve. So again, they might do a bench press, 80 kilos, 10 reps, nice and easy. When they probably could have done maybe 15, 16. All right. What you want to be doing is probably increasing the weight because a 15 rep bench set is probably not going to be the best way of eliciting hypertrophy. All right. Never really truly push themselves. So again, they'll go through the motions. Don't get me wrong. There might be days where you go into the gym straight from work, etc., and they're going to be tiring. They're going to be a little bit like going through the motions. But as long as you can push yourself on that given day in those given circumstances, you're well on your way. Okay, that's something you want to be thinking about. And then you just spend years spinning your wheels. Why are things not improving? Why am I still looking the same? Why is my weight's not increased? All right, how boring is that? Not progressing. So why does this happen? Okay, most people, they might fear of doing an exercise incorrectly and their form breaking down. They may fear of injury. They might think, I don't want to go too heavy because I might hurt my shoulder, or I don't know about this because of my knees, for example. They have no clear progression system. Okay, they're not tracking your lifts. Most people watching this probably don't track their lifts. I use an app called Rep Count, which I can put all my exercises in with the sets and reps. So when I then do it the following week, I can look back and go, okay, right, I did 3 sets of 8 with 50 kilos. I now know I need to implement some form of progression. All right. Clients who work with me, they have an app that they use. All of that's broken down. Okay, so they have that built in. which is obviously fantastic. They might train alone without accountability, so you go in, you only keeping yourself to yourself as such. So, you've got no real level of accountability to increase the weight, do more repetitions, add an extra set, for example. And then also ego. Choosing weights way too heavy for an ego perspective, especially if you're training mainly groups of lads, the amount of times like dumbbell chest press and they're just lifting stupid amounts of weight and you just think your pecs are getting nothing from that. There's no tension in there. They're just moving it from A to B, all in the delts, all in the shoulders, all in the elbows, and it's just for ego. And then wonder why A, they may end up injured, and B, why they're not growing the way that they want to grow. So how can you instantly go about starting to gain muscle mass? All right. I would be choosing 6 to 8 compound lifts per week. Okay. So let's say we do 3 gym sessions a week, which might seem low to many, but again, if you're training hard, you're recovering hard, you're eating enough food, this is perfect to start with. You could then maybe increase to 4 gym sessions per week, which then would add more volume, as I've spoken about. But get used to training hard first. So 3 gym sessions a week. You might do 2, let's go with a full body training split. On a Monday, your 2 main lifts might be a bench press and they might be a goblet squat. Okay. On a Wednesday, your main lifts might be a weighted pull-up and a deadlift. And then on a Friday, your main lifts might be an overhead press and a leg press, or a dumbbell row and a leg press, for example. Okay. So you've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6 main lifts there that you're going to implement all of the bits I've just spoken about. Okay, you want to track every working set. You want to take it to sort of as close to failure as possible, but maybe 0 to 2 reps in reserve on that last set in particular. But making sure you are logging your weights, you're adding in notes so you know exactly what it is you need to do. I don't know what words we're trying to say then. Also, film your lifts. If you're someone who really wants to improve the way that they look and the way they train, film it and review it. Okay, maybe you film yourself doing a Romanian deadlift. You watch someone on YouTube that you followed do a Romanian deadlift and you think, okay, am I sort of similar? Am my cues being sort of thinking about hips back, allow my body to fold forward, coming just below the knee, etc. Use that as form. Okay, if you notice that I'm doing a deadlift and all I can feel is my lower back, well, maybe you need to tweak things about. And also make sure you're using structured programming. Like I say, have a program to follow. It's going to take a while to get used to the skill of performing a movement at a level of intensity we need it to be at. So don't go chopping and changing week on week. See it all the time. Like, it's going to take 2-3 weeks just to get good at the movement, get your body used to bracing, stability, etc. And then you can start implementing some forms of progressive overload. As if you're chopping and changing each week, you're not allowing your body to do that. So mistakes that kill progress the most: swapping exercise weekly, as I've just spoken about, not tracking sessions, as I've spoken about, too much junk volume all the time. If you're doing like 3, 4, 5 working sets on an exercise, especially some form of a compound lift, and you're taking it within close proximity to failure, I don't believe you. You're not training hard enough. Sorry, but that's true. You're training everything but intensity. So you train every single exercise in the gym, but you lack intensity. You've got no program to follow. You don't know how much volume you're doing. Are you adding in progressive overload? Not pushing to failure. These are all things that I see when it comes to not making progress in the gym, specifically gaining muscle. All right. So what do you want to focus on instead? All right. What do you want to take away from this video? So focus on mechanical tension, probably the main driver behind muscle hypertrophy. Okay. So that's using a substantial amount of load for a given rep range. Again, the rep range is a guideline. I've spoken about rep ranges before. So anywhere from probably like 6 to 12 reps if it's muscle hypertrophy. And we're thinking about, as putting as much tension in that desired muscle group as possible with a substantial amount of load, and aiming to implement progression over weeks and months within a training cycle. Train close to failure. So again, I would always say your last few reps, you want your last rep to be, if I was to go again, someone would have to run over to the gym and spot me. Okay. If you can get to that position, you're in a really good position. You're in a good place. Consistency over perfection. Okay. You're not going to progress every single session, granted. But if you're not, look into why. Are you sleeping enough? Is your nutrition on point? Are you well hydrated? Has stress been higher? There's so many other metrics that can be the reason why you're not progressing. But address those first sort those out, and then you probably will see improvements in the gym. That is how you're going to go about building real muscle mass. Okay, so if you want to know more about how to go about your training, I know I mentioned about different training splits, nutrition, everything else. I've got a completely free winter building guide, which is going to be in the link in the description. All you've got to do is click on the link, pop your email in, and I will send over a free guide, which is going to go through your training program, nutrition, recovery, some mindset stuff, everything there that you can utilize over these winter months to get strong in the gym, build muscle mass, and actually start changing and developing your physique. All right, inevitably, because that's what we want. It's what we go to the gym for, to improve the way we look, improve the way we feel, and just improve the way of general life. Because training has a huge impact on other avenues, not just look in the part. It's also confidence, relationships, work, etc., etc. So if you want to grab yourself a free copy of that, click the link in the description and it'll get sent over straight away. But hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two. If you have, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.